I do think with the new laws that are occurring in different cities, like Local Law 97, being able to implement something like Runwise, which is like a boiler management system that also does leak and gas detection. Being able to implement that into your building, not only are you saving money on your expenses, but you're able to reduce any penalties that you might face due to Local Law 97.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Keeping It Real Estate. I'm Nick Belbis. I'm the Director of Acquisitions here at Granite Towers Equity Group. I'm subbing in for Dan and Mike today as your host, and I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Ryan Elazari. Ryan has been involved in the real estate industry since 2006. Most recently, he spent over 15 years at Empire Management, where he would eventually become the Senior Director of Innovation and Strategy. Ryan is also the co-host of the CRE Unplugged podcast, where he has conversations with the brightest minds in commercial real estate. If you want to be on the forefront of AI and technology in the real estate industry, then this is the episode for you. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nick. Thank you. And that's a really nice introduction. I'm blushing over here.
Right on. Well, we're glad to have you on. Ryan, do you want to share just a little bit about where you're from and how you found real estate?
I grew up in Manhattan, so real estate was around me in terms of buying and selling and being in this like tight knit Persian community. There were a lot of people in like family friends and family members that were involved in real estate. So that was a topic of conversation in a lot of gatherings that I was in. And it kind of piqued my interest. And every summer I took a different role in the real estate industry. I worked as a broker. I worked under a property management team. I worked under a acquisitions team. So I was able to learn about the ins and outs of the industry. And after I graduated undergrad at George Washington University, I decided that I wanted to shift my focus into finance. Ended up working at Bank of New York Mellon as a compliance analyst. And after a couple of years, I realized that I couldn't get real estate out of my mind. I wanted to get back involved. So I worked for Empire Management as an associate, went and got my master's at Baruch College. And in 2015, we developed an app called Bixby, which was a tenant experience app that also allowed our tenants to pay their rent online. So that helped with a lot of the inefficiencies that we had in our company. And once we sold out to Alfred in 2019, I kind of took on the role as head of innovation to figure out other technologies or solutions that are out there that could help our company become more centralized and be able to be more productive and be able to do our work at a faster rate. So I had lucky enough to demo hundreds of companies, kind of learn what's out there in the real estate innovation and technology space. And yeah, I have a podcast called CRE Unplugged, which I started last year with my co-host Nadine Ezzi, and we're bridging the gap between innovators, founders, with people who are investors, developers, and owner operators, and kind of educate them and make this world more accessible to them.
That's great. Thanks for sharing your story, Ryan. And I've listened to a few episodes of your podcast, really enjoy it. I look forward to continuing to listen. And we're so glad to have you on today to dive into this world of AI and technology and real estate. I actually met you at the AI and Real Estate Conference in New York City. You were a moderator on a panel that I happened to be speaking on. And I'm so glad that we got to connect and so glad we can have you on the show to dive into some of this stuff. I want to start out talking about AI in acquisitions. What are the applications of AI in acquisitions right now?
Yeah, I want to first talk about how in any organization, it's so important to have your data structured and your data be in a data lake, because without that, any application that you bring in to your business, it's not going to work as effectively. So I can't stress the importance of structured data. What do you think about that, Nick?
When we're talking about structured data, we mean that if you have a portfolio of real estate or 100 deals that you've underwritten, it's all formatted in a uniform way so that a model, an AI model, can ingest it and provide insights. Is that what you mean when you say
Yes,
structured data?
exactly. Yeah, it's basically being able to take all the data that you have out there and be able to put it into one single source of truth.
Absolutely. I think it's critical, and that's the direction we are heading at Granite Towers. Is that something that you were involved in at Empire? Is structuring the data?
Yeah, that was one thing that became our focal point, was to be able to take all of the data sets that we had, put it into one data lake, then being able to analyze our properties in a much higher scale, and then also be able to look at our potential acquisitions in a much different place. And we were just at the antithesis of looking at like automated market analysis. So being having AI to pull like all the market comps, rent rolls, and operating statements, so we could operate every deal at a faster rate. And I thought what was really great that we were getting into is like predictive valuation models. So being able to forecast like property values, historical data, macroeconomic data, micro market like factors. I think though being able to figure that out using these different applications that are out there can get you such a bigger competitive advantage than people who are also looking at a similar deal, or all the deals that we're probably looking at on a daily basis.
So the first thing you said was completing market surveys with AI. When did you start doing this? What year?
We started looking into this in about the early parts of 2024.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And then from there, you mentioned using AI to provide valuations both for acquisitions and your portfolio. Were you doing this within a software, or was this all happening on Excel in, uploading stuff to ChatGPT and getting the analysis done there? What does the workflow look like here?
Yeah, Nick, that's a good question. At first, we were looking into generative AI, so using ChatGPT to kind of help us analyze our potential deals in our existing portfolio, and using that as like kind of like a co-pilot, I would say, not Microsoft Copilot, but just as a co-pilot. And then I started to look into different vendors that were out there that could potentially be able to help us in a much different light. So it was kind of starting small and then working our way up to more advanced features.
So you were finding third parties. You all were not building your own software and tools at Empire.
Well, we did only for our tenant experience application that we had with Bixby, but when it
That's
came
right.
to other matters, we started to look into just buying.
What do you think about, this is a problem that we're running into, is do we want to build or do we want to outsource? Some of these technologies can be expensive every month, and you think maybe you could just build something for 50 or 100,000 instead of paying $1,000 a month. It might make sense down the road. How do you think about that problem in finding AI solutions for different problems?
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's something that we were looking into, and as I said, we built our software in the past, but I think with the advancements of AI and how cheap it's getting to build these products, you could essentially be able to build in house at a much lower scale than you can in the past. But we didn't want to get into the whole business of hiring data scientists and engineers and creating our own type of software. We felt more comfortable looking at to third party vendors to be able to handle a lot of the solutions that we were looking for. But I think at the end of the day, it kind of looks into what your company is in need of. And if you need something that feels like more customized to your business, you should definitely look into building it yourself. And if that's something that is going to be a hard laboring cost to you, it might make more sense to look into the buying aspect.
Got it. That totally makes sense. I'm glad we could get your perspective on that. I wanted to ask about AI in underwriting. When we were at the conference, it seemed like everyone was building their own underwriting software. Have you found any that worked, or have you heard of any that are working really well?
I think there are companies out there that are trying to capture this market share. I know of a company called Quick Data AI that's essentially taking the information that you'll have on your property management software and then being able to create Excel, implement that data into your Excel model or create T12s from their application. I also know of other companies. I'm not going to name their names because they're in stealth mode, but they're essentially taking OMs and taking that information and putting it into your Excel model. So you still have your Excel model, you still have like your underwriting structure. You're just saving hundreds of hours looking at deals by taking those figures and putting it into your model.
And you think that's the direction the industry is heading, is everyone's going to adopt these tools?
I think you're going to have no choice unless you want to keep spending more and more time being like analyzing deals when you could basically just spend a few hours and looking at and forecasting your model and being able to then negotiate and go through your due diligence faster instead of just looking at hundreds and hundreds of deals and taking all that time every week into doing that. Like you could focus on things that matter more for your role, right? I feel like that could be more valuable to you, right, Nick?
I agree. And another thought that arises for me is if you're spending time training team members on underwriting and these team members leave, you could be spending that time training an AI model, and this AI model will stay with you for the long haul. So I agree that that's the way things are heading.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think not having to spend that time and hours and energy into training and just having the AI model do it for you and not have to then probably hire more analysts, I think that's a game changer.
I totally agree. I'm glad we could dive into that a little bit. Um, I wanted to transition, talk a little bit. Well, first, is there anything else going on with AI in acquisitions that you feel like we should really cover on today's podcast?
I guess the only other topic would be in terms of risk detection. So finding out zoning issues or tenant default risk or looking at lease clauses that could potentially affect your NOI. AI, there's solutions out there that are doing that for you right now. And I think those are probably things that people should be focusing on. I also know of another stealth mode company that are going to be able to predict when certain parts of your facade are going to be damaged or need replacement based upon their large language model. And then you could basically be able to take that information and put that into your budgeting forecasting so that you know exactly when you're going to have to pay for those repairs or replacements.
Wow. And the first technology you mentioned, talking about zoning and other legislation, stuff like that, compliance, is this an AI tool that like scans Google Maps and references it with government records, stuff like that? Is that how that works?
That's one application that's out there that's doing that. Another one is you've got applications out there like GatherGov, for example, that are going and listening to all of the different hearings that are going on in regards to development and being able to
Wow.
capture the appetites of what certain cities or towns are interested in being able to build out there.
Is this only happening in somewhere like New York City, or could I look up a small town in Ohio on this app you're talking about?
It's all across the United States. So they're being your eyes and ears at all of the different councils that are talking about this type of zoning changes that they're thinking about. You could basically be able to use their application to find out which cities are being able to want to build at certain areas.
Wow, I had not heard about that yet, and that's really interesting to me. I'm glad you brought it up. How about AI in property management? One thing I'd love to talk about right off the bat is IoT sensors, and what is an IoT sensor and how could it bring value to a real estate owner?
Yeah, IoT centers is Internet of Things sensors. So you've got smart thermostats or HVAC centers that are optimizing the heating and cooling by monitoring your occupancy or external conditions. So being able to capture where people are and then having more cooling or heating based on those zones. So I think that's great. And then you've got electricity, water, and gas leak detection, and that's a really big thing. So being able to find out when you're going to potentially have a leak before it starts happening, you're going to be able to save so much on your capital expenses and also lower your insurance premiums by being able to capture that before the damages occur.
Wow, okay, so I want to dive a little deeper into Internet of Things. So basically, what that term means is you're you're putting sensors on different systems in your building,
Yes.
and you're monitoring them on a central dashboard on your building or across your whole portfolio to see if you have a water leak, if you have risk of a water heater blowing up, stuff like this, to be more proactive in the maintenance of your buildings. Is that how this works?
Yes, exactly. It's basically predictive maintenance. You're being able to predict when you're about to have a major damage occur in your building, and kind of like Minority Report, you're going to be able to find out the problem before it actually happens.
Have you seen companies or have you been involved in any companies applying this technology?
I don't know firsthand companies that are, I can't really list them out to you, but there are a lot of companies out there that are implementing a lot of these type of solutions. And
Got it.
and especially I know we're going to get into this, but I do think with the new laws that are occurring in different cities, like Local Law 97, being able to implement something like Runwise, which is like a boiler management system that also does leak and gas detection. Being able to implement that into your building, not only are you saving money on your expenses, but you're able to reduce any penalties that you might face due to Local Law 97.
Can we explain Local Law 97 a little bit more and any other legislation that you think is relevant as we're talking about IoT sensors and just AI and property management?
Yeah, with there's a lot of cities now that have adopted building performance standards, so they're putting like a hard cap on energy use and carbon emissions. And with Local Law 97, any buildings above 25,000 square feet face up to fines up to $268 per ton of CO2. That's beyond the limit. Then you've got Washington, D.C., that has the building energy performance standard. So that's requiring buildings above 50,000 square feet to meet their energy use intensity targets. And they'll face fines if they don't meet these targets every 5 years. And then you've got Birdo, which is requiring energy and water use for buildings over 35,000 square feet. and they're mandating improvements for the least efficient buildings. So again, like sustainability investments, it's no longer optional. So you have a lot of properties that fail to meet these carbon caps that are going to face a lot of fine, a lot of asset risk, and they got to come up with ways to become more efficient and adopt all this renewable energy so that they could lower their operating costs, meet the demands that your tenants are having, and also improving your cap rates. So being able to track all of this is something that needs to be done now with your underwriting.
Absolutely. And you mentioned one law in DC and then local law 97 and Verdo, was it?
Birdo.
Verda. Are these in New York City or are these nationwide?
So building an energy performance standard is Washington D.C. and Birdo is Boston.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Well, it sounds like you're pretty well versed. It sounds like you've done your research on those, and I'm glad you could share it with our listeners today. Um, what about leasing? Obviously, a lease AI is big, and there's other competing technologies. How is AI helping to improve efficiency in the leasing office and within managing a property?
Yeah, you've got at least AI. So they're essentially chatbots that are able to answer any questions that probably your leasing administrator has to answer every day. So you're basically saving hours and hours of time by implementing a lease AI. I was speaking to someone who adopted a lease AI, and he's telling me that they're saving their company 20 hours a week by their leasing administration team. So being able to use those hours and focus on more important tasks or more creative tasks like marketing or just generating more leads or focusing on getting quality tenants into your property, I think that's pretty valuable. You also have a company called BetterBot that's doing something really similar, but they're also able to create virtual tours or be able to just go through like the whole leasing life cycle for you at a certain property.
Interesting. Yeah, we've been using Elise AI across our portfolio for the last year, and we have seen several thousand inquiries responded to through Elise AI, both on the website and on the phone. And while it took some time to train our staff to utilize the technology, we're seeing improvements, and I think it's critical to continue implementing. What about AI in accounting? Accounting is such a critical area of any company. Is AI able to contribute to any processes within accounting, or is it not quite there yet?
Well, at our company, we were using a application called Avid Exchange, and that wasn't necessarily being processed by AI, but it just allowed us to process all of our invoices into one place and know exactly which invoices are being directed to which property, because in the past everything was paper driven and it was driving everyone insane. So being able to have something like this was really key, and it also helped our asset management team because we knew exactly the costs that were being associated to each building, and then being able to categorize each of those costs so that we know where exactly the money is being spent for each property.
That's powerful. So this was a system where you were matching POs with invoices using AI, and it was working.
Yes, it was working, and they're not specifically made for real estate, but it was the one application that we thought was perfect for our business.
That's awesome. I'm sure some of our listeners will find value and maybe reach out to you to learn a little bit more. Any other applications in AI that you've heard about or seen?
If we can go back to leasing, another company that I thought is really interesting right now is Surface AI. So what they're doing is being able to audit your leases, and also they are focusing on due diligence. And I think that's a great application that's out there. I think that's something that a lot of companies need, being able to look at your leases and see if there's anything that's irregular or not standard to what you probably have for the rest of your portfolio. So I would definitely check out Surface AI as well.
Wow, that sounds like a powerful tool for people who are buying multifamily, and we will be checking that one out. What about AI for limited partners? A lot of our listeners are limited partners. They're evaluating a lot of opportunities from different sponsors. How should these folks be using AI to evaluate their investments?
I've not used AI to evaluate investments personally, so I've not any. I don't have any recommendations for LPs. For GPs, I do know there's applications like Agora to help with kind of being able to process all of your deals into one place, and then being able to send your K1s to the appropriate LPs, and it kind of becomes a CRM for each of your deals that you have under your portfolio. So I think that's a great application. Uh, but in terms of evaluating deals as an LP, I'm sure there's a lot out there. I'm not very familiar with them. In my case, what I do when I'm an LP and I'm looking at a deal, I come up with 20 or 30 questions that I have about the deal and see if the GP is able to answer all of them effectively. And from there, I could kind of gain more knowledge on the property, then do my own research, and then kind of determine if this is something that I want to invest in or not.
I think that's a great recommendation for vetting your sponsor and finding good deals.
Yeah,
Um,
you can also create your own GPTs and kind of work with your GPT to help figure out ways into how to ask questions to your GPs and talking to it so that you have a list of questions ready for every deal that comes your way so that it could kind of save you a lot of time so that you're not formulating the same or different questions each time you're speaking to a GP.
I think that's a great recommendation as well. So, as we've been talking about AI and real estate this whole time, we've talked about so many different tools. I want to talk about the venture capital landscape for AI. And I just want to share a couple stats. I was reading an article in The Economist. According to PitchBook, a data gatherer, almost two-thirds of VC dollars invested in America in the first half of this year went to AI firms. Last year, assets managed by American VC firms approached 1.3 trillion, more than 3 times the level in 2015. Money left over from the pandemic era fundraising boom has been swiftly diverted into AI startups. So, within real estate, how refined does your product have to be before you get funded, and who's funding these technologies, Ryan?
That's a really loaded question, and I could break it down in terms of who's funding these products. I mean, you have like the general venture capitalists. So in Q1 of 2025, you had over $2 billion being invested into the prop tech space, which includes AI solutions for real estate. And some of the big players out there are Fifth Wall, JLL Spark, Metaprop, Navitas Capital, Camber Creek. Those are really the big players in terms of that. And then what's really interesting, and I've been talking about it on my own podcast, is you have these companies that are bootstrapping their product through AI, and they're allowed to. They can be a lot more lean and a lot more cost effective, so that they don't need that VC funding, and then they could end up going into IPO or getting bought by another company because of the way that they're able to expand their company using artificial intelligence. So that is food for thought for VCs who might want to take a different type of approach or a more innovative approach into investing in these real estate technology companies. But lastly, you also have a lot of debt financing that's going in right now into these companies. you got about $734 million that was invested in these firms through debt financing. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but I do see a lot of the leaner bootstrapping companies being a lot more successful in scaling at a higher rate.
Absolutely. Well, I think that you've brought a tremendous amount of knowledge to our listeners. Ryan, is there anything that we didn't touch on today that you think we should really mention before we hop off here?
Yeah, I would like to say, I think right now what you're seeing, and this is something that Nick, we've talked about this, you've got a lot of the larger companies right now that are really focusing on adopting artificial intelligence. They really understand the benefits of it. You've got JLL, CBRE, Tishman Speyer. They've got like their venture arms, and they're bringing in a lot of AR products into their business because they understand how powerful it is. But you've got these mid-sized companies that aren't believing the hype yet. They probably think this is another one of those blockchain crypto type of hypes that is not going to really change the landscape of the industry. And they're kind of been falling behind on the integration. But then you have smaller companies that really have been either adopting their own AI or they've been building their own AI because they understand how powerful it is. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen with these mid-sized companies. Are they going to start believing in it, or are they going to still take a step back and take this laissez-faire approach, which I think is going to be detrimental to their company?
Wow. Thank you for providing some more information there, Ryan. It sounds like it's critical to be on the forefront of adopting these technologies or you're going to get left in the dust.
100%. I think the future of AI is now.
That's right. Well, Ryan, for anyone interested in connecting with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yes, you could find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on X. And then if you want to follow our podcast, you could find us at our website, CREUnplugged.com. We have our episodes there and also our social media presence so that you could look at all of the episodes and content that we have through the podcast.
Sounds good. And if you're interested in learning more about the investment opportunities we have coming up at Granite Towers Equity Group, head over to granitetowersequitygroup.com/invest. You can subscribe to our email list and stay updated on the future opportunities and our newsletter. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. See you soon.
Thank you, Nick.